Now, this week's guest is someone I have long admired. A fellow journalist turned author. He is the writer of 21 novels, several plays, a couple of musicals, and even an episode of Bad Sisters. It is the father of Ross O'Carroll Kelly, the inimitable Paul Howard. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You also have the dubious honour of being the only straight male guest on this season of You Have Me at Hello. So thank you for doing it. I appreciate it.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure. It's one of my favorite topics is rom-coms.
I love that,
especially 80s and 90s rom-coms. Yeah,
brilliant.
Yeah.
So, how are you feeling? Because the last Ross is now out in the world.
Yeah, a bit sad.
Aww.
A bit kind of after the party kind of thing. I finished writing it back in January, so it's kind of, I've been saying goodbye to Ross in my head for the best part of a year because, even during the course of writing the book, I was conscious that all of these characters that I'd been writing about for over 20 years, like Fionnuala, Charles, Buckets of Blood, Ronan, I was moving them off the page, and I kind of wanted to give each of them a little kind of farewell moment in the book. So it's a very emotional book for me to write.
I'd say so.
Of all of them, it was, when some author friends of mine, they used to say, I was crying when I finished writing a book because I'm saying goodbye to my characters. And I used to sort of secretly sneer behind their backs, But this one, I was very emotional.
It's a different situation, right? You've been living with these characters for so long.
It's 20, I wrote the first Ross column 27 years ago in January. So it's a long, long time. Most of my adult life, but most of my life actually, because I was 26 when I started writing it, and I'm 54 my next birthday. So yeah, it's a huge amount of time.
Like, you've watched those children you wrote grow into adults. That alone is crazy, and become parents themselves.
Not just that, because I've watched my readers go from children to adults, which is the strangest thing.
I'd say.
I used to go to schools and colleges and read for the kids, transition year kids, and they used to say to me, "I love your books," and now they say to me, "My old man loves your books."
Oh, no way!
Oh
my God!
Yeah.
Well, I have to thank you myself, because I was a little public school girl that ended up in Trinity, and I knew nothing about the culture of rugby or hockey or private schools at all.
Right. Okay.
So I started reading the early books, the Teenage Dirtbag Years, the Mocha Frappuccino.
This is your guide to Trinity.
Yes,
was
it was. And I know obviously they're set in UCD, but it's that particular breed of Dublin person from that time, and it kind of opened my eyes to the realities of their lives and how kind of different they were to my own.
Completely.
I'm a Ronan.
Right, as am I, and that's kind of where Ross came from. Like it came from, I grew up in Ballybrack, and I grew up in a council house, which is, that was my childhood, and we lived right next door to Killiney.
Right.
So we kind of had a window on that world.
You could see
as
across
kids.
the moat.
Yeah, we could. I remember as a kid walking through a housing estate in Glenageary, a posh estate. We called every private housing estate was called posh land. That's what we call it. We cut through posh land, and we cut through posh land. Me and my older brother Mark, and the guards pulled up in a car and asked us what were two lads like us doing in an estate like this.
No way.
And from childhood, partly due to that, but other things as well, I was always chippy about class. I had a huge chip on my shoulder about the people I was writing about. They enraged me, and
that's why you were good
at it.
at it.
So Ross was kind of my revenge, really, on them, but it never worked out like that. Like I really wanted them to hate it, the people I was writing about, but they liked it.
That's
interesting. They were my audience. That's the weirdest thing. Like I still get invited to, Blackrock College, Clongowes,
the very ones
Mary's,
you were taking the piss out of.
Holy Child Killiney, all the schools I've sent up over the years.
But
get
isn't that
me
lovely?
to go back every year. Well, no.
So
it is.
You're
but I totally
proper...
failed as a satirist, No,
but it's written with such warmth, though. Is that?
Yeah.
I don't think that's a fail. I think it's so all encompassing that it could reach somebody like me, and that the people it's about still love it as well. I think that's lovely.
Well, thank you for saying that.
But you're a proper journalist as well. You like annoying people. I've never liked annoying people. I just want everyone to like my stuff.
Yeah, I mean, up to a point, I suppose, But yeah, I mean, look, a long, long time ago, I realised, and I'm talking like 20 years ago, I realised, no, they're not annoyed by it. This is my audience. The people you're sending up there, the people. I mean, I was invited to give the pep talk to the Blackrock College Senior Cup team before they played Clongowes.
Wow.
I was saying to them, but
Are you sure?
but me. So they said, yeah. And I said, but I'm taking the piss out of them. And they said, yeah, but they kind of feel it validates them in some way. And I went, fair enough. If they...
Yeah, grand.
So I go along, drove up that driveway, and there was a kid from Willow Pork, the feeder school, waiting for me at the front door. And he sees me coming. He's about 7 or 8. And what I loved about this kid, he was going to take me down. That's what he was there for. He's going to cut me down to size. But he didn't have a bunch of mates sort of sniggering around the corner. He was on his own, on a solo mission to take me down. And he just looked me up and down and he said, "This is a major honour for someone like you."
At 7 or 8?
I mean, it was... And then what was great was he just walked off. I didn't even have a chance to come up with a comeback. Like, he just walked off. And I'd love to know where he is now. He's almost certainly a member of the Fine Gael front bench. I'd
Child,
say, like,
if you're watching, you had me at hello, please write in.
he had a whack of a young Simon Harris about him.
Oh, very good.
But anyway, that was that. So I went in and I didn't know what to say to the kids. So I gave them the speech that Father Fehely gave to the Castle Rock College team in the very, very first Ross book, which was the Miseducation years. And so it was like, your fathers are very, very rich. After today, you won't have to work hard for anything else in your lives ever again. And they cheered every line. It was amazing. They're
buying what you're selling. Like, they're literally like, oh.
I knew I probably should get out of there pretty quickly, though.
Yes,
So I stepped down off the stage and they formed this sort of Guard of Honour, the kids did. And as I'm walking through the Guard of Honour, they're chanting, "Legend, legend,
oh my
legend."
God.
And then when I got to at the end of the Guard of Honour, I noticed there was an emergency exit there. And I just pushed the bar and ran back to the car. And then they got beaten by 40 points, I think, that afternoon.
And it was obviously your fault for riling them up in the wrong way.
I just didn't want to be blamed for it, yeah.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Well, look, we're going to talk about a film that is about sports, but about American sports. So not about your rugby culture.
Yeah.
Tell me, what movie have you
there is
chosen?
a lot of high-fiving in it.
Oh, so much.
And a lot of sort of jockish carry-on.
Yeah.
The movie is Jerry Maguire, from which your
my
show takes its title.
Sprung.
Yeah.
And it's the only film in the AFI, the American Film Institute's top 100 quotes that has 2.
You have me at hello.
Yes.
And you complete me.
Show me the money. Yeah.
So many quotable lines.
It's one of the most quotable films ever. When I was doing my research, some of the rom-coms, they haven't got great zingers, great one-liners. Yeah. This one is just all zingers. Yeah.
And even her sister has that great line where she says, don't cry before a date, cry after a date like I do.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
It's amazing.
So many great lines. It's a brilliant script.
So it came out in 1996, written and directed by Cameron Crowe. And Cameron Crowe had been known for Fast Times at Ridgemont High at that point. And he would go on to do Almost Famous, which was a huge hit, both, as a cult film now, as in the kids like it. And at the time it was very successful. But this was kind of, he was lucky he got this made. Basically, James L. Brooks of The Simpsons fame took a chance on him.
Right.
And he was 3.5 years developing the script, and he initially wrote it for Tom Hanks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it would have been a completely different film, I think. Yeah.
I love these sort of sliding doors moments with casting. Yes. It's one of my favourite films of all time. And I watch it, I've probably seen it 20 times.
Yeah. It's a rom-com for lads, right?
Well, this is the beauty of it. I'm excuse me for gender stereotyping.
No,
here,
I did it first.
But it's a movie for women, because it's got Tom Cruise in it, about things that men like, about something that men like. It's about sport,
which is very clever.
So I remember going on a date 30 years ago to see that movie, and it was a first date.
Wow.
Because and it was that thing of, it appealed to everybody, and the cinema was full of couples.
Was it with Mrs. Howard?
No, it wasn't with Mrs. Howard. Miss Howard came along about 10 years later.
Okay.
But I do remember the cinema was full of couples.
Yeah.
So it was that.
It's a real date
no man was dragged along to see it.
Right. Okay, I like that.
Because it's got sports in it.
Exactly. So it was inspired by a memo that Jeffrey Katzenberg wrote when he was at Disney in 1991. Similar to the memo that Jerry writes. It's, he's kind of clear-eyed and hopeful for a new type of business, a new way to do things. And Katzenberg eventually ended up founding DreamWorks with Steven Spielberg, so he's done all right. But in the film, obviously, it begins with Jerry kind of having this epiphany where,
Yeah.
you know, he's obviously this sleazy, successful guy, but I think now he'd probably be diagnosed with ADHD because he's hyperactive, he's kind of all over the place, but he has this kind of mission. He keeps calling it a mission statement, not a memo.
Yeah.
That, you know, they can do their work better. It can be more about people.
Yeah.
And the reason he's feeling like this is because a hockey player's kid basically told him to fuck off. Because
it was really shocking, that moment, because you don't often see kids swearing on screen, you know.
So he's grown a conscience overnight, basically, because this hockey player has had so many concussions. It's obviously not good for him, and he just starts to feel bad about this multi-billion-dollar industry that he's in. So Cameron Crowe was a big sports fan, but also a big rom-com fan, a big Billy Wilder fan in particular. So eventually he got a 50 million budget to make this film, and it was a hit. It ended up making 273 million. It got 5 Oscar nominations, because these were the days that rom-coms got Oscar nominations, and 1 win for Cuba Gooding Jr. So it was by all means a huge success. And people often ask Crowe if he's going to make a sequel now, or a remake. I personally don't want to see that. It's very of its time.
Yeah.
But interestingly, what he said was if he was ever going to, it would be about the secondary romantic relationship in the film, which is Rod and Marcy.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of dovetails nicely with something I always think watching this film, which is I didn't have any hope for it's Tom Cruise and Renée Zellweger for Jerry and Dorothy. I didn't think beyond. I thought I'd give them about a year together,
which everyone thinks,
and that's kind of one of the reasons this doesn't really sit easily into the realm of rom-coms for me, because, you know, at the end of Pretty Woman, I went, I think I'd give them a 50-50 chance, which is kind of the you know, the marriage success rate in America. I didn't give Tom Cruise, I didn't give Dorothy and Jerry any chance. I thought there was no, it wasn't there, you know. There's a really interesting moment in the film, and I watched it again last night, where Rod Tidwell, who's the American football player, his lone client after he gets sacked, he says to him, he said, "Do you love her?" And Jerry says, "How do I know?" And he said, "You know when you know." And Tom Cruise had no idea what love was.
Yeah.
And he has this great line, I think later on, where he says, "Tell him what he's won, Bob, a wonderful marriage." So I thought, he did say to Jerry, if you don't love her, you need to tell her. And I thought that was really, really good advice. But I don't think Rod was saying you need to go home and try and fall in love with her.
No, he was saying break it off.
Break it off. Yeah. Like, this is really cruel what you're doing to this woman.
So when I initially asked you about this podcast, you said that you think that it's more of a buddy movie than a rom-com, and that we could debate it. So we will debate it. We'll get into it. We'll get into it. But let's go back a little bit first. So Dorothy, played by Renée Zellweger, she is a single mom. Her husband has died very young. She's only 26. And she has the cutest kid ever.
Yeah.
Inexplicably named Ray. I don't think I've ever seen
I love that he's named Ray. He has like sort of real grown-up name. Like, Rays are usually Raymond until they're about 12.
Absolutely.
And then, you know, they get cooler. And I love that he was Ray from The Office.
Adorable. He's almost like a little teddy bear. He's just like your quintessential perfect child actor. And I remember seeing a picture of him recently now, obviously all grown up, and he has a six-pack, and it just feels very wrong.
Yeah, I wouldn't Google him. Like, no. I prefer to keep the image of
keep the image of cute Ray. Yeah. He's very cute. So she is, from the first time we see Dorothy, she's on a plane and she's sitting in kind of the first row of economy, and Tom Cruise as Jerry is in first class, and he's waxing lyrical about his life to his seatmate, and talking about his fiance and how, you know, his life is so amazing because he works hard and he's a very driven guy. And Dorothy turns around to little Ray and says, "Oh, first class used to mean a better seat. Now it means a better life." Yeah. But she's kind of swooning the whole time she's listening to him. She knows he's not available. Yeah. But she's kind of like, God, he's so dreamy. Isn't he perfect? Yeah. And they meet then. Their actual meet cute is in the airport when they arrive in LAX. Yeah. And she knows him. It turns out that they actually work together. And she's thrilled that he knows who she is. straight away. He's like, Dorothy, you work in my office. And she's like, oh my God, Jerry Maguire knows who I am. And you can see from there she's a smitten kitten. Like she fancies him straight away. And when he has his breakdown and is like, I'm done with this, I'm going to set up my own, she's the only person who has any faith. She goes with him. His own assistant doesn't go with him. She's like, no, sorry, I'm staying for a pay rise. Whereas Dorothy's like, I'll go. Like, and her sister, played brilliantly by Bonnie Hunt, who to me is always a quintessential 90s mom. She's the mom in Beethoven.
I always get her mixed up with Helen Hunt, right?
Because I think
they're kind of. And when I found out her name was Bonnie Hunt, I was convinced they must be sisters or something, because she's very like the Helen Hunt character in As Good as It Gets. And I always get them confused. They're not related at all.
They're not related. She was in Jumanji. She was in Cheaper by the Dozen. She's that real 90s like domestic character. But in this, she's a bit of an edge. Can I just go back to what you were saying there about Renée Zellweger's character getting all starry-eyed when she sees Jerry Maguire? There's a real sense of like she's seeing Tom Cruise. Absolutely.
It's like at the end of ER. It was like George Clooney couldn't play anything other than George Clooney, and there was lots of, anytime anyone saw him they were sort of swoony around him, and it's a bit like this. I think it might be even an in-joke that just pretend when he turns up for the date, and I think her sister says he better not be good looking. She opens the door and Tom Cruise is at the door with sunglasses on, and she goes, of course you are, or something like that, you know. But he was very much playing Tom Cruise, and I think she was playing off Tom Cruise.
Yes, absolutely. And Bonnie Hunt actually said afterwards that it was difficult to play somebody who didn't like Tom Cruise, because he's just such a great guy. Everyone loves Tom Cruise, which is bizarre to me. But look, you know, that's the way things are. Apparently he's lovely, and he sends people coconut cakes every year for Christmas.
Is that right?
It is. Anyone he's ever met essentially gets a coconut cake. But yeah, so she's kind of smitten straight away. We know that. He notices her because she's a beautiful woman, but he's engaged to this absolutely feral woman called Avery,
who was perfect for him.
Perfect.
She's absolute. And at the end, I was pulling for Avery to come back.
And she's played by Mrs. John Travolta, Kelly Preston, another Scientologist, might I add.
She's fantastic.
She's brilliant.
She's really, very aggressive. The only bum note I thought in the whole script was when she was kind of the alpha, I felt, in the relationship, sexually, in the love scene, and then even just like career wise, like she was the tough talker and everything, and then she appears to be breaking up with him, and for some reason, and it may have been a script rewrite, they switched it and they had Tom Cruise dumped her, and it didn't ring true for me. I don't know why they did that. I don't know why they couldn't have given her agency to end the relationship,
because that would have made him feel even more pathetic and like a loser, because like for him to at that point be like, no, I'm actually done with you, it kind of gives him a bit of a power that you don't think he has at that time. He's kind of feeling like I wondered was that a Tom Cruise note? Do you know what? When I was doing my research, I read an interview with Cameron Crowe, and he said that when he was going to approach Tom Cruise, a lot of people said to him, Tom will never play a loser. So don't even try. That's interesting. But Tom loved the script. And Tom Cruise at this point is at the absolute height of his powers. He did not need to do this film. He is Tom Cruise, action star, courtroom drama star. He'd just done A Few Good Men. And Born on the 4th of July. Like he's I thought he should have got the Oscar for. Like, right? He was And he didn't need to do this, but he was just really charmed by it and just really wanted to. And then after this film, he actually took a bit of a break. I have in my notes here, he went and this was before his kind of divorce from Nicole Kidman and his reinvention as, like, he did Magnolia after this, after
Vanilla Sky, which I think was Cameron Crowe as well, wasn't it?
But a very strange film for both of them. Kind of
sci-fi really odd, but I think that was his Oscar run, wasn't it?
And he did not get there, God bless him. But the real star, the real standout in this film is Cuba Gooding Jr. as Rod Tidwell. Now, my husband had a few problems with his casting because he does not look like a wide receiver in the NFL in the 1990s, but he's just electric. Like, he's amazing. So he's playing this kind of this football player who nobody really takes very seriously. He's not a star. He gets pushed aside for the bigger stars.
And he has an attitude problem, and I think that's the key. I was saying earlier on about, a great movie script is one in which everybody changes by the end. He certainly changes by the end. He's this kind of scowling, he has a chip on his shoulder. He has a chip on his shoulder. And by the end, he this great moment where he says to Jerry, you want me to dance, don't you? And then he does dance, after this concussion moment at the end, he gets up and he dances and he becomes this footballer that people want to know.
He's a star all of a
and he
sudden.
becomes a star, yeah. But he's amazing. And there's that scene where he's in the bath with his kid, and he's got this sort of like a grey afro of suds,
bubbles,
and he's shouting, "Show me the money" down the phone, and it's actually Ray who picks the phone up, and he's saying, "You talk too much. Put me on to Jerry." That's absolutely
brilliant.
electric.
And apparently they let the kid ad lib a lot with Tom Cruise. So the bit where they first meet in the living room, when he's saying the human head weighs 8 pounds, that's all. They're just letting the kid talk.
Well, and also where Tom Cruise says the zoo's fucking closed, and he goes, "You said fuck."
Yeah, he's brilliant.
I won't tell. Such a cute moment.
He's adorable. Normally a kid in a rom-com can piss me off. Like in Love Actually, it really pisses me off.
Yeah.
But in this one, it's just perfect.
Yeah.
Like they come as a package. You know that Dorothy and Ray come as a package, and at a lot of points, you know that Jerry is more interested in Ray than he is in Dorothy.
Well, that's the other reason I don't think it's a classic rom-com.
Yeah.
It's a classic film, definitely. But for me, there's two stories in this. There's the A story is the buddy. It's a buddy movie, and the buddies are are Jerry and Rod Tidwell. The B movie is another. The B plot is another B movie, buddy movie between Tom and Ray.
Yeah,
and the love story is kind of the grouting, and it's probably because I don't really believe in the love story. I don't believe they're suited for each other. I don't believe they were going to stay together. But that's how I see it. I just see it as a buddy movie, brilliantly cast. I mean, everybody is the chemistry between all of the characters is absolutely fantastic. But as a romantic film, I don't buy it.
It's funny because when Jerry leaves the agency and decides he's going to go out on his own, automatically Dorothy becomes his employee, and her sister is saying, "Can he afford you? Has he got medical? You have a child?" Because in the States that's obviously hugely important.
Yeah.
And she's saying, "Oh no, I trust him. He'll get there. He's amazing." And straight away their relationship is really inappropriate. You know, he tries to kiss her very early on.
By today's standards. Yeah. Well, actually there's a great acknowledgement of that in the movie where he said he kisses her and then he says, "I feel like Clarence Thomas."
Yeah.
And she says, "You don't have to feel like Clarence Thomas." And I thought that was really smart of them to acknowledge that there was this sort of power imbalance between them because he was her boss way before its time. I mean, I don't think many other movies would have kind of put that little,
especially in the 90s, Clinton era America. Like, yeah,
100%. She said something like, he said, that was inappropriate. And she said, "I may not sue."
It's brilliant.
Because it's Tom Cruise.
Exactly. But then he invites her out to dinner and it's very clearly a date. She's wearing a dress that makes him say, "That's not a dress, it's an Audrey Hepburn movie."
What a line. What a line.
Yeah.
I mean, if only I could have come up with lines like that in my life, at the right moment.
There's still time.
Yeah.
There's still time.
But he brings her to the crummiest restaurant.
Yeah.
This Mexican restaurant, wasn't it? It looks awful.
In fairness, I personally think it looks great, but that's just
right.
me. I think she was expecting the
tables
ivy.
were all on top of each other, and there was a band playing La Cucaracha. Maybe I made that bit up, but they definitely had sombreros.
No, they keep coming over to them, and he's like, "No, we don't need the music." And then they just are relentless.
And then this band turned up at the wedding. They were the wedding band. I missed that detail all the times I watched it, and I watched it last night and went, "That's the band from the restaurant."
Amazing. But you do feel like Jerry is just being swept along with her enthusiasm the whole way. He's just like, "Oh, I guess this is a date." She's wearing a sexy dress. They get very intimate on the front porch to the point where, it's inevitable they're going to have sex. And they do so to very loud jazz music. And the next morning, she's with her sister Laurel and she's saying, "I love him. He's amazing. I'm in love with him. He's the best." And he can hear her. Now, for me, as a woman, I was just like, "Shut up. Just stop it."
But she uses that great line. She says, "I love him for the man he almost is."
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Which is the loser thing, which is great. And she, even though he is a loser, he looks like a loser at this stage.
Yeah.
He wants to be something better, and that's who I'm in love with.
And I mean, that's lovely.
Yeah.
Fair play to her. She's a very nice lady, is Dorothy. But he doesn't scarp her. He sits down with the kid and eats his cereal, and the sister's like, "Jesus, okay, maybe he's going to stick around."
Yeah.
But the business is going really badly. She might have to take a job in San San Diego. And just because he doesn't want her to go, he says, why don't we get married? And I forgot that they actually get married. I couldn't believe it.
There's that moment by the she's packed everything into this U-Haul,
yeah.
And they're about to take off, and to stop her going, he says, why don't we get married? And it's just the most unromantic proposal.
But she's delighted.
She's delighted, and she has the shades on, doesn't she? And she takes them off and she's crying, and that's her answer, the tears. But they get married
in the back garden.
In the back garden,
because they've no money.
With the it's amazing that Tom Cruise had no money in the bank. Like,
yes,
you know,
I kept thinking that. I was like, where's your money, Tom?
Sure, he had some savings, like, you know. But they get married, and the wedding it's like you say, Vicky. It's a bit of a miserable affair. But there's a moment later on where she's watching the video of the ceremony of Jerry just before the ceremony. And he's sweating bullets,
freaking out,
you know, and he looks all apprehensive and everything. And she knows in that moment, this man didn't want to marry me.
Mm-hmm. But you think to yourself, why did he keep going along with it to this point? Is he so lost that he's just like, sure, I'll marry her, it'll be fine. You know, he says to Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character, I married her because she was loyal.
Loyalty, yeah.
Oh my God. Like, that's the last reason you want somebody to marry you. But again, he has this family vision in his mind that Ray is such a big part of. And honestly, when Renee goes to him, when Dorothy says, we've made a mistake, like I lured you in with my child, basically, and I you know, we're wrong for each other, and I'm happy to take responsibility for it. Let's call it a day. It's saying goodbye to Ray that really upsets him the most.
Yeah, that's it. There's that moment he's sitting by the bed and Ray is asleep, and he doesn't want to wake him up to say goodbye because he knows he'll be.
He's trying though, isn't he? He's kind of poking him to say goodbye in the hope that the child will wake up.
That's such a lovely moment. But you know, after that scene, I didn't feel like, I remember even seeing it the first time, I didn't feel like this is a huge mistake. I hope they get back together. No. I was kind of saying, get Avery back in here. Like,
you know? Were you gone that far? You want him to get the shark lady back, who is hilarious, and every time you see her after that, she's giving loser signs to him behind his back. So basically, Jerry and Rod are offered a terrible contract, and they don't want to accept it. And it's funny because what changes their look is a near-death experience. Rod is tackled, he lands awkwardly, and you know, his poor wife is at home watching him unconscious on the field, wondering. Now Jerry is there because he's loyal. He's learned loyalty from Dorothy, and everyone's saying, get up, get up, get up. And he doesn't only get up, as you say, he dances around the field and he's delighted, and he becomes a star and he gets his big contract. And that's the beginning of things for Jerry. And this is why I do feel it is a rom-com.
Okay.
Because this is where Jerry and Dorothy are over. He owes her nothing really. Mm-hmm. I think they are technically still working together. I don't think they've fully dissolved that relationship. She hasn't got a new job anyway.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to go back to her. You know, it's in his biggest moment that he misses her. His phone rings and he says, Dorothy, but it's Marcy looking for Rod.
Yeah.
And he's just like, oh, I really wanted to talk to Dorothy. You know, that's...
Yeah.
Now, I see what you mean. It's not classic. He's not perfect. He is an anti-hero. But he goes to the house in front of Laurel's Divorced Women's Club, which is basically a support group for sad ladies.
Yeah, what a scene.
And he prostrates himself. He says, you know, he comes in, he says hello twice, which is very important. And then he goes into this, you complete me. And it's actually a throwback to the beginning of the film when they're in the lift after they've walked out of their job together. They're in the lift and there's a couple signing to each other. And he said, oh, I'd love to know what that guy just said to get a kiss like that. And he said, you complete me. Yeah. So he comes, he gives it this, and he's giving it socks. I know. He's giving it socks. And then she says, stop it. And you don't know whether she's going to say, fuck you, get out of my sister's house. Yeah. She says, you had me at hello.
Does she say shut up?
She says, shut up. Shut up. You had me at hello.
It's great.
It's iconic.
It's such a great scene.
And the famous Tom Cruise smile just creeps across his face at that point. Yeah. And it's beautiful. And at that point, I'm delighted. And they're very much, you feel like he's got his act together to the point where he doesn't have loads of money. You know, his future is uncertain, but he has his family and he is mad about her. And all the divorced women are obviously googly-eyed going, one of them says, this is the best support group I've ever been to.
That was the best. I love that line.
Brilliant.
I absolutely love that line.
Even the hard-nosed sister who has never approved is taken in at this point. He says, I want my wife back as well. He's very adamant about her being his wife. Yeah. And
he's very much into the institution of marriage that stage.
He's 35 and in his head he should be married by 35.
Yeah.
And Dorothy already has been married, and that's why she says at the beginning, I'm the oldest 26-year-old in the world, because she's been married and bereaved.
Yeah.
you know, and it does, to me, that does feel like a happy romantic ending, whether it's not a perfect story.
No. Can I ask you about, they sort of did a job on the the first husband's reputation. They threw a line in there where she said, I was married to a man and he wasn't very nice to me. And I don't know why they needed to do that. Was it because, you know, we're supposed to believe so much in this in her relationship with Tom that she had a bad marriage? I kind of thought that was unnecessary.
I think so. And did they say how he died? I don't think they do.
No,
they just say that he died.
That she was in love. She was married to a man. And then he died and he wasn't very nice to me or something. It kind of, that felt like a line that was sort of added in for, you know.
Yeah, I mean, she's still a hopeless romantic. She's still sparkly eyed. So maybe that's because she's so young still. She believes in love, and you kind of think she's glad that he's dead.
I think that's why they did it. I think that's what, because it was like they didn't want her sad.
They didn't want her grieving.
They want us to know that. Like she's, you know, she says to Tom Cruise when they're having their dinner, let's not tell our sad stories tonight. Yeah. And I think they wanted to kill that as a sad story. Like you said, almost to make us believe that she was happy.
Yeah. Well, I think they want you to believe that Jerry is her one true love, right?
Yeah.
So
I think
in order,
so. Yeah, I think that was it.
You know, because she has the kid, she has to have been married before. She couldn't have been, you know, an unmarried mother. That would have been in 1996. That would have been frowned upon by American audiences.
I get what you're saying. I think that the final scene is one of the great romantic scenes, like, of all time. Yeah. It's a fantastic scene. I felt that there was. Emotionally, we went up the gears too quickly.
Right. From
the moment in the stadium to the end, where we seemed to go from park to fourth gear immediately. And the moment that did it, the trigger in that moment was Marcy saying, because they don't know whether Rod is going to be, you know, paralyzed for life, and he has no contract, so he has no insurance. So if he's back, they're screwed.
Yeah.
So she says. He's the most important thing in the world to me. This family doesn't work without him.
Yeah.
And that's the trigger for Tom to say, that's what I want.
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
What I'm missing.
And you did say to me before we recorded that you thought that he just kind of wants what Rod has.
Yeah, I think that's what I got that sense. What's interesting is Dorothy doesn't really have any agency.
No.
In Tom.
She's just a goner.
In Jerry coming back to her. It's like, it's actually, you know, a classic rom-com is, say, Pretty Woman, for instance, you know, Julia Roberts' character saying, could you not be a little bit more like this? And what's his name? Richard Gere's character saying, could you not be a little bit like this? And they meet in the middle. Right? Yeah. And that's usually what happens. In this, Jerry makes the journey, the full journey. Yeah. He runs, actually. He runs.
He does. He literally runs.
But what's interesting, he ran he runs in all of his movies.
He runs so much in this film.
He ran for Rod before
he
ran for Dorothy, which I thought was interesting.
And Dorothy's actually part of the divorced women's support group at this point as well. She's literally sitting amongst them.
She's sitting there. I don't know. I just kind of felt we needed to see Dorothy do something or say something that made Jerry want to be with her, but it was kind of external things.
My husband pointed out that the film is also just called Jerry Maguire, and the poster is just his face. You know, she is so secondary in her role to, you know, it is pitched as, here is a movie about a man and that's it. It could be about anything.
Well, I don't know. I mean, that might be deliberate to get men to go to see it, but I did think she was absolutely stunning in it.
Brilliant.
She's absolutely gorgeous in it. And I thought they played her down a little bit.
They make her dowdy. I noticed one thing, women notice these things in films, is that they make her wear the same cardigan 3 times.
Yeah.
On 3 different occasions.
Yeah, and that kind of that yellow sweater that she was wearing that ended up with the pasta all over it. But there were, even when she came into the room in the dress was a nice dress, but it wasn't an Audrey Hepburn movie, right?
Yes.
It was just
she's very much in her sister's kitchen.
Dress. Yeah. And it's a good line from Tom, but you know, it's very insincere, I thought.
It's a great line, but that's just how charming he is. Like, he just spouts perfect lines all the time. Yeah. And I think the costumes are really interesting on the men, because it's all flash, it's all chunky watches. There's one scene where they're all sitting in a room wearing white shirts. Everyone's just wearing a white shirt and a loud tie and a watch and slick back hair, and then Rod's fashion is fabulous. He's so 90s. He's like wearing this gorgeous 3-piece suit and a hat at one point. Like, he's slick. The women are very much secondary.
Yeah, baggy
Unfortunately.
suits and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think the thing that really aged the film, I mean, Tom Cruise actually looks younger now than he did
He
30
looks
years ago.
great.
But the one thing that aged the film was the technology.
Yes.
And technology ages all films now. So we had
The flip phones
like
with
the
the
flip
antennas.
phones and a payphone.
Yeah.
He makes a call from a
Yeah.
payphone at once. And I was thinking, why is he not going to? How has Jerry Maguire not got a mobile phone?
It was obviously a work mobile because he does at the start.
Yeah, he makes a. But then there's a laptop that's like chunky, like it's a good sort of 4 inches thick. The desk computer is enormous. The terminal on it.
It's kind
There's
of
a
analog
fax
looking
machine.
as well, like black with green writing.
That's right, all the writing on the screen, and the fax machine is the size of my microwave. Like it's a giant thing. And
Do you know one thing I noticed as a newspaper man you'd appreciate is that they had all the day's newspapers marked up in the office of great importance in the middle of the room because that's where they got their information.
That's where you got news. You waited the next day to buy a newspaper.
And when
to
I
find out what's
started
happening.
in newspapers, that was still very much the case. Whereas now it's just completely obsolete.
Yeah, and the news doesn't change from day to day. It changes from minute to minute now.
Yeah.
And then there was a great moment. They burned his little black book of women's numbers at his bachelor party, I think it was, and even just that, like having your numbers and addresses and names in a little
written
book,
down.
like written down.
It's gas. The whole romantic films before phones, like a lot of the films that we're watching for this podcast are set in the 90s and the early 90s, and that technology just isn't there, and it's fascinating to watch. Because I was there for that era as well. You had to arrange to meet someone and actually go.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm 38. Everything changed so quickly, and now we have the apps at our fingertips, and everything's quite unromantic, I think, in the digital world.
Yeah, it's just easier now, isn't it? And
too easy.
And there's no friction. But having to make a call from a payphone, it's a great kind of 90s movie moment.
Absolutely. And the music is so 90s as well. Like when Tom is in the car after he's made his big decision to go by himself, he's singing Free Falling by Tom Petty, but he's singing I'm free, and everyone's like, yeah, and then he says falling. And it's like, it could go either way. And there's that very famous Bruce Springsteen song, Secret Garden, which you could kind of say is the love theme because it's played over all of the romantic moments. And that had come out in 95, but after the success of the film, it re-entered the Billboard charts in 97 as a kind of a sleeper hit for Bruce Springsteen.
It's a great song, but it's interesting. I said this to my wife this morning. About that song. She told me I was thinking too much about it, by the way.
That's what writers do.
It's really interesting about that song because it's about a woman. The film is about a man who can't show intimacy, and the song is about a woman who can't show intimacy, which I thought was interesting.
Absolutely.
The love scenes in it as well are very 90s as well.
So 90s, so softly lit.
Really softly lit. You mentioned it. I think it was Miles Davis was playing while they were at it. But she left her bra on for the love scene, which is and I think all romantic comedies in the 90s were like that. They
had a blanket over them in a way that just wouldn't physically work.
Yeah.
They always had a blanket.
Or alternatively, men just had absolutely no interest in women's breasts in these movies. Perhaps, it's like a kind of afterthought. I forgot about that.
Yeah, he's actually very interested in her décolletage on the porch. He's he's all about here.
He's a fantastic drunk as well. He plays plays a great drunk. You know what? There's times in that movie, and I've heard actors say this about Tom Cruise, that you'll be in a scene with him and he shouts, and you suddenly think he doesn't seem to be acting. He seems to be, know. And there's a couple of moments in that movie where he says a line, and you can actually almost see it register on the other actor's face.
Yes.
Oh my God.
They call him the last big movie star for a reason. He's just this consummate professional and a fascinating character in the ecosystem of Hollywood. Like he's forgiven a lot by people for his very public divorces and the kind of the Scientology whispers around him are just kind of cast aside because it's Tom Cruise. It's absolutely fascinating. Yeah. We've talked about the quotes, so I had written down a lot of them because there are so many. Renée Zellweger's character at one point very early on says that optimism is a revolutionary act.
Oh,
which I
wow.
love.
Yeah,
It's a great one.
Yeah.
She also says, man, whoever snagged him must be some classy babe. And the next scene is Avery and himself swinging out of the bookshelf in the nip. And then they actually sit down butt naked and eat fruit together at the table, which was...
It was very 9.5 weeks, actually,
Very
that
9.5
moment.
weeks.
That kick, the way it kicks from that scene to the because I was thinking, well, she must be such a classy babe. I was thinking that's such a 90s line as well, isn't it?
It is. And like she has this vision in her mind of what his perfect fiance would be like, and it's not Avery.
And then she says, like, apropos of nothing, if you ever want me to be with a woman, I will.
Yeah, she goes, I thought it was a phase in high school or in college, but I'll do it again. She's amazing. The quotes throughout are incredible. Like it's the evil coworker that eventually sacks him says, everyone loves you, Jerry. It pisses me off. Yeah. Because he does have this lovely aura, and if he hadn't written down his thoughts and distributed them to people, he would have got away with it. And I bring everything back to the Real Housewives, and there's a great quote from Real Housewives where they say it, forget it, write it, regret it. And I was just thinking, right. Jerry wrote it and regretted it the whole time. Yeah. There's a brilliant part when Dorothy says, I'm trying to raise a man.
Yeah.
She's like, I'm not trying to be with him, I'm trying to raise a man.
Yeah.
And I thought that was beautiful. And another point when Jerry says to Dorothy, this is going to change everything. And she says, promise.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
optimism.
that's a great line. There's another line where he says to her, what do you want, my soul? And she says, yes, maybe I do.
Amazing.
Great line.
Perfect.
Yeah.
My favourite quote that's not often discussed is another one from Cuba Gooding Jr. He says, single women don't date. They've been to the puppet show and seen the strings. And I love that because it's so true. And actually, Marcy is an unsung hero. Regina King in an early role, and she's absolutely phenomenal. She's the one that has your heart in her hands when her husband is unconscious on the playing field, and she's freaking out on the phone to Jerry, and you feel it. You're like, oh my God. She's actually a real driving force in the film.
She is, and she had a lovely heart as well, because she was the reason Rod stayed with Jerry.
Yes.
Because he says, I like you. My wife likes you. And up until then, you've only seen her tearing strips off Jerry about how he's not doing his job and everything, but she kind of has a sense that he's going to come good for them. And
she
love
does.
That,
she believes in him. She's another loyal woman.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Marcy.
Yeah.
And in the end, they get their $11 million over 3 or 4 years. He gets a 4-year contract.
Yeah.
And they're set up for life.
And he cries.
He cries his eyes out on telly. Now, the ending is, I think it's just enough. I don't think they over-egg it. I think you see, at the very end, you see Dorothy and Jerry and Ray walking off together. Are they going in the direction of the zoo? Who knows? But it's lovely. I don't think they've kind of overdone it too much. And do you know what? I thought that it had a lot of similarities with When Harry Met Sally. In some ways. I know The Crow is a big Nora Ephron fan, but it's Christmas time in LA when at the end when he comes in to make his speech in front of the women. Yeah. It's the same When Harry Met Sally. He kind of realizes something and he runs to tell her immediately, can't wait.
Right, okay.
It's New Year's Eve and When Harry Met Sally. And also there's the chapters interspersed throughout the film of the old person giving wisdom. Yeah. So in this, it's a guy called Dickie, and he's Jerry Maguire's mentor, and he just pops up. I think he pops up 6 times, and he just says something inspiring. Yeah. And that happens throughout When Harry Met Sally as well.
Right,
where
of
they
course.
have older couples kind of popping up and telling stories that relate, and then the last one is Harry and Sally telling their story. So I think that structurally and also thematically, it does echo When Harry Met Sally, which to many is the greatest rom-com ever made.
Right. Yeah,
to me.
I mean, for me, it's up there. Yeah, Pretty Woman, I think, might be the most perfect. I think. I mean, this out of all the movies we've discussed, this is my favorite. But my thing is, it's just not. It's not a romantic comedy the way Pretty Woman.
Yeah, that's a classic.
Comedy.
We had for episode 1, we had the lovely Katrina O'Sullivan discuss Pretty Woman.
Oh, brilliant!
And it was fascinating. So you have to listen into that.
I will. I love those moments from Dickie, his former mentor.
Yes.
My favorite one. He said he beats his chest and he says, "If this is empty," and taps his head and says, "This doesn't work." Yeah, brilliant.
And he's right.
Yeah,
he's right.
So
it's all about passion.
They use a great song, a Bob Dylan song. Shelter from the Storm, for the credits, for the closing credits. It was
Right.
brilliant.
Well, there is no one big pop song, right? That's because a lot of romantic comedies would have one big pop song that they
Yeah.
can then use to market the film
Yeah.
on MTV, the MTV generation, and they don't have that in this film.
Well, I suppose Secret Garden was the song.
It's the one.
Yeah. And
There's only about 2 lines of it throughout, though. It's the same
Yeah.
2 lines repeated.
it's that great line, "You've gone a million miles, how far'd you get?" What a line.
What a line.
Such a
the
great,
boss. The
yeah.
boss. Well, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
For coming and talking about Jerry Maguire.
yeah.
How many cheesy popcorns out of 5 would you give it?
I'm giving it 5 out of 5.
Amazing.
It's I absolutely love it. You know,
I'm going to dock half a mark because you are correct. It is more of a buddy movie overall, I think. But the
Yeah.
romance is there enough to make it into you having it hello to
Look,
name our podcast.
There's plenty of romance in it, but I just don't think they were going to make it.
Do you not think it's so now 30 years later are they?
If they
you
did
think
a
they're
sequel,
divorced?
I think they would be probably divorced 29 years.
Really?
I reckon
Oh.
so. I didn't see it. Like I didn't have great hope for them at the end.
I give them I give them at least a decade.
Oh,
Maybe
right,
until Ray
okay.
was like grown up.
Yeah, yeah.
Who knows? We'll never know because Cameron's not going to make the sequel. Paul Howard, thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thanks, Vicky.